Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Let me get to this first here. There's a lot of talk right now, of course, about China and its influence in the media and, of course, its influence in our elections. Again, that should go without saying, but as we all know, it's not just China. It's never just China. But the moment, again, that some of this news started to come out here as of late, you, of course, are seeing a lot of different politicians immediately take to the microphone and basically do whatever they have to do to save face. Case in point, here in Ohio, you have Senator John Husted, who took to the microphone the other day on the floor of the Senate and basically said that Ohio is the gold standard of election integrity. Something along those lines. It was embarrassing because, of course, Ohio, along with at least 15 other states, is listed as highly influenced by China. And it's not just technology companies, of course, and election machines and things of that nature. It's actual people. It's human beings, people on the payroll, people communicating with individuals, again, within government, who are then communicating with individuals in foreign countries. And like I said earlier, it's not just about China. However, this week also, interesting timing, Donald Trump releases an email that was just unclassified, and current acting director Pulte for the DNI also reposted it, and essentially, again, it was dated November 20th of 2020, again, right after the election, and it says, again, subject line, note to election threat 45-day ICA China section drafting team. And then it has a listing of its classification, and then there's a couple of redacted portions of this, of course, having to do with other people's emails, but it's a short message, and it simply says the following, quote, all, and then there's a redaction, and it says, blank has heard, received nothing. We have deliberately massaged our one pending PDB to avoid any direct links to the election. The massive report we have been waiting on has been chopped up into 13 reports that likely will not get out until late next week. Many/all of them will be cross-posted into blank or downgraded to blank so that you can be more readily incorporated into the 45-day piece if needed, unquote. And then there's a message below it that says China and Korea strategic assessments. That was at least the subject line of that. Again, from a strategic intelligence analyst. The point of the unclassified message is that it shows that individuals within these three-letter agencies, specifically the NSA and, of course, within all of government, but specifically the NSA, were basically saying that the messages that they were going to be giving the president were going to be watered-down versions of any infiltration or influence or what have you, specifically, again, having to do with China. Point being, again, that our own government is working against the interests of the American people pretty consistently all of the time. This isn't shocking to us, of course, but the simple fact that he puts out this declassified email should show everybody that this is a massive problem. Now, Praying Medic put this out on his Telegram page here today as I'm recording, and it's kind of a little summary of another Substack article that an individual wrote, again, about a lot of this influence, but it says the following here. Revealed, here are the mainstream journalists on China's payroll. The Post said the following. It says, foreign agent filings reveal that operatives working for a Chinese Communist Party-linked influence organization planned free trips for American journalists based on the potential for favorable coverage, quote-unquote, and sought to effectively disseminate positive messages, quote-unquote, about Beijing. But the filings did not plainly identify the reporters who received the access. By cross-referencing the filings with archived newsletters, annual reports, and contemporaneous accounts, this investigation has uncovered the names of prominent American journalists who participated in China trips organized or funded by China United States Exchange Foundation, or CUSEF. It says the roster includes current and former journalists from the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, NPR, The Associated Press, Vox, The Atlantic, The Los Angeles Times, The Chicago Tribune, and other major American news organizations. In several cases, the trips were followed by columns and reports defending Chinese government policies, attacking President Trump's confrontation with Beijing, or presenting the decline of American manufacturing as unavoidable. It says CUSEF was founded by Tung Chi Hua, that's right, a former vice chairman of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, a central component of the Chinese Communist Party's United Front system. A bipartisan congressional report explains that the United Front seeks to co-opt and neutralize sources of potential opposition to the policies and authority of the CCP. Its targets include foreign governments, universities, businesses, media organizations, and other institutions capable of shaping public opinion. Of course, we know other foreign governments, do we not? And foreign countries that do the same, I think we do. It says CUSEF's own foreign agent records reveal how the strategy was applied to the American press. Washington lobbyists and public relations firms working for the organization describe plans to recruit influential journalists, generate favorable coverage, quote unquote, and effectively disseminate positive messages to the media, key influencers, and opinion leaders, and the general public regarding China, unquote. Again, this is treason of the highest order, but it's not just China, because Israel and Mossad do the exact same thing. Again, China's just the flavor of the month, and they're the consistent pincushion, so to speak, because again, apparently it's easy for everybody to digest that it's China. But if you say Israel, for example, everybody just flips out and loses their mind. However, when I was done reading that particular post, of course, just reading the headline, I immediately thought of a Q post, and I knew visually which one it was, but I had to find it. It's post 1515, and it shows this massive list, and it's huge, of all of these media employees who were named in the WikiLeaks documents having to do with colluding with the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign during the 2016 election cycle. And again, it's a great deal of them. There's at least half a dozen from ABC, and they list all their names, George Stephanopoulos, of course, being one of them, David Muir, who's on the nightly news on a constant basis, Diane Sawyer, and then it goes into the Associated Press. There's 3 individuals there. There's April Ryan, rather famous as well. Let's see, there's 4 from Bloomberg. There's a couple from BuzzFeed. There's about half a dozen from CBS, 1 from CNBC, a John Harwood, and then a boatload from CNN. I mean, a ton from CNN. Aaron Burnett, Jake Tapper, Jeff Zucker. I mean, the list is endless. It goes into the Daily Beast, Huffington Post, Los Angeles Times, MSNBC. There's a massive list there as well. NBC, The New Yorker, 2 from NPR, 1 from the New York Post, The New York Times, again, another half dozen at least. PBS, Charlie Rose, specifically. People Magazine, Politico, Reuters, The Hill, Tina Brown, Univision, Vice, Vox, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Yahoo. And again, at the very top of the post, it shows an interesting image, which is important. It shows basically a Venn diagram and a communications map of the number of times in which individual reporters will communicate with people within government. For example, in the middle of it, it has a reporter, sort of again on a cell phone. And then it has arrows shooting out in every single direction, all in a general circle. And you're talking about, again, individuals within 3-letter agencies within our government. A senior special agent, another senior special agent, a staff operations specialist, deputy assistant director, again of the FBI in particular, a deputy assistant director, an FBI executive, management and program analyst, senior special agent, more senior special agents, and so on and so on. And then those individuals, again, communicate back with that reporter. So again, is it treason? Of course it is. We would like to see individuals, of course, be held accountable. We would like to see individuals in the media, again, be imprisoned for engaging in such activities, if not worse. It's punishable by death, after all. But there's an interesting element, too, which, again, leads me to this next piece of audio and this next description that I want to play. and it's the distraction game. This is a game, again, that Mossad plays very well, and they do it consistently, again, within our own media, and they do it, again, with other accounts and numerous individuals on social media. They always try to paint China as the bad guy. Again, never telling anybody that China has its own deep state. And I'm not agreeing with what China does, not by a long stretch. I mean, you can't even get into China, let alone get out. So, again, not a fan of the country by any stretch of the imagination. But what they do, of course, is they immediately go after China and highlight China. And then, of course, who else do they highlight consistently? Muslim countries and Muslims in general. Islamic jihadist terrorists, quote unquote, and all of that. Again, that's real, and that's a serious problem, of which I'll get into here in just a second. But the boogeyman that no one ever talks about, of course, is Israel. See, that's the one that you'll never hear the news media actually bring up. They'll never hone in on them as being the ones who are creating a lot of this division between groups and between people. The division is legit. I'm not saying it's fake. It certainly isn't. China, of course, likes to buy up our land, our farmland, even though they have a very small percentage of it. But they like to buy up a great deal of things. They like to steal our property. They like to steal patents. They like to, again, create technologies that Americans have created. I mean, the list is endless. They like to infiltrate our country, the countries around us, specifically Canada. You know, I could go on and on and on. But Israel does the exact same thing because Israel is the one who taught them how to do it. It's just like, of course, Cuba being the boogeyman as of late, and Cuba's in the news all of the time. Well, who taught the Cubans to be communistic? They didn't learn it on their own. They figured this out over the course of time by reading, again, the Communist Manifesto and numerous other books, of course, which were written by Zionists. They, of course, have a massive lobby as well, as everybody knows, within the United States government. They're all throughout the education system, APAC, the whole thing. They fund politicians. I mean, again, the Jewish influence within American culture, so to speak, is everywhere, and it's not a positive influence by any stretch of the imagination. The interesting part, again, is that numerous accounts exist to consistently deflect from Israel. Case in point, this particular account, this is from a gal who apparently goes by Strength for Israel, at Strength for Israel on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and X. Now, they bring up an interesting point, and I played this particular audio in the last war video, and I'm going to play it here again, but it has to do with what is referred to as the North American Islamic Trust. This, again, is a 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit religious organization that was founded in 1973 in Indiana by the Muslim Students Association, MSA, of the United States and Canada. Again, it's not a good thing. And you're going to hear why. And then, of course, its influence in American schools, because it does exist. But it also, of course, exists when it comes to just invading our country, which is exactly what they're doing. So again, you have Chinese influence by and large within American politics and American, again, land, we'll just put it that way, and politicians and business owners, etc., etc. And then you have Israeli influence, but as we all know, that's massive and probably the biggest. And then, of course, you also have Islamic influence, which is equally as terrible as the other two. Again, these are really our enemies. And if people can't see this, this is really the biggest problem here. So give this gal a listen. Again, she's right, but give her a listen in 3, 2, 1.
There is an organization operating in 42 American states right now. It holds the property titles to hundreds of mosques across this country, and it was named in a secret document as part of a plan to destroy Western civilization from within. That organization is called the North American Islamic Trust, NAIT, and I've spoken about it before. In 1991, a Muslim Brotherhood operative wrote an internal memo never meant to be seen, but the FBI uncovered it. It was entered into evidence in the largest terrorism financing prosecution in American history. That memo described a strategy of, quote, eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. It listed 29 organizations as part of that network. NAT was on the list. Here's what NAT does. They run a property program where mosques sign over their building titles permanently to NAIT. NAIT's own website says these funds have historically been used for, quote, military and political purposes. 400 mosques across America and Canada have handed their deeds to this organization. Court cases in Minnesota and Ohio show that when disputes arise, they don't go to an American court. They go to a religious arbitration committee tied directly to the same Brotherhood network. A federal judge in the Holy Land Foundation terrorism case wrote that there was, quote, ample evidence connecting NAIT to Hamas. And last month, NAIT announced a brand new national partnership with CARE. This is not ancient history. This is happening right now in your state, possibly in your town. The Brotherhood's 1991 memo said the goal was to make their movement permanent through institutions. They're not hiding in caves. They're holding the deeds.
Since they're holding the deeds, who runs the banks? See, that's the bigger problem here. As she's giving that entire little rundown, she has a Star of Rem fan pinned on her collar. See, this is why these issues are not black and white. There are shades of gray. There are multiple dimensions to it. You have a Jewish woman on Instagram telling everybody that the Muslims are the problem. They're in your backyard. They're influencing endless people. They're gathering up property. They're doing this. They're doing that. Is she wrong? No, she's right. But who else is doing that too? If you take her entire speech right there and you just replace it with Israel and Jewish influence instead of Muslims, it's equally as accurate. Again, this can be boiled down, I think, to something rather simple, and that is who pays for the plane ticket? Who pays for a plane ticket for an individual who doesn't have two dimes to rub together to come from a Muslim country or an African country that is largely Islamic? Put them on a plane, bring them over to the United States, and have them infiltrate our land, our government, elected positions, communities, you name it. Give them a roof over their head, give them a place to stay. Again, who pays these people? And the answer, of course, is a lot of these organizations are funded by individuals who happen to be Jewish. This is not difficult. People would say again, well, you're just picking on them again. No. This is, again, it's your basic follow the money. It's the same follow the money tactic that you can use with just about anything. I mean, they didn't pick this information up through telepathy. They were taught it. They were taught how to do this. Just like the Somali fraud you see. Again, these individuals are Muslims, but they're taught this fraud. They're taught how to engage in it, how to get it started, what to do, what forms to fill out, what signatures to provide, what boxes to check, and then they teach one another how to do it. The elders stay home with a roof over their head, paid for by your tax dollars, and then they just engage in copious amounts of fraud. And oh, by the way, if they get caught, they just get on a plane and they go back to where they came from with any money that they stole, if they can get the money from point A to point B. If they have it in a bank account, an international bank account, whatever it is, then they can access it back overseas in whatever sandbox they came from. Again, let me give you an even more specific breakdown here of the North American Islamic Trust. And again, you can interchange these names with any other organization you'd like, because they all generally operate exactly the same. Here's Grok's quick breakdown of it. According to NAIT's own materials and public descriptions, it serves as trustees, record owner, and for properties in more than 40 states, and reports over time have cited roughly 200 to 400 plus institutions. The market value of these holdings has been described as several $100 million. Local communities and their independent nonprofit boards continue to operate and manage the facilities. NAIT states that it does not interfere with day-to-day operations, programming, or governance. Of course it doesn't. It says the WAQF structure emphasizes the perpetual nature of the endowment and the fixed intent of the original donors. There's pooling community funds through vehicles such as the Islamic Center's Cooperative Fund for Mutual Benefit and limited interest-free loans to support mosque school projects. Yes, they're embedded in, again, creating more Islamic schools, so much so that any single time a church gets burned down, which happens with regularity, or, again, some Catholic boys' school ends up closing its doors, who's always there to buy it up? It's the Muslims. But who's giving them the money? I'm not saying they don't have their own cash. They certainly do overseas. But infiltrating America and wiping it clean, certainly of any European ancestry, is their plan. Look at the state of Texas. Look at the number of mosques that exist in Texas. This is a massive problem. It's an invasion. Dearborn, Michigan, very famously. I mean, the list is endless. The Somali problem within Columbus, Ohio. Huge problem. It goes on here. It says Sharia-compliant investment products via a for-profit subsidiary, Allied Asset Advisors, which manages the Imam Fund. In the last war video, I played footage within a Plano, Texas, whatever it was, a Plano, Texas town hall. A Muslim gets up to the microphone and starts advocating for Sharia law. He tells everybody that Sharia law is safe, that it's a good thing, that don't worry, once you vote it in, and I mean, eventually that's what they want it voted in, and they want the entire Constitution eliminated. I think that goes without saying. But again, they want everybody to just be compliant under Sharia law. See, here's the weird thing about religion. If I can just spend a quick little side note section on this. The weird thing is that of all of the religions, it seems as if Christians are the only ones that basically say everybody should just leave each other alone. Not so with the Muslims and not so with the Zionists. They basically say, you need to believe what we believe or else. But see, it's also these three groups of people, and these three, whatever you want to call them, religions, I guess, these three groups of individuals have been fighting each other for centuries. If anybody believes for a minute that isn't happening today, right now, they have their head in the sand. They also, of course, have been a product of the American schooling system, and they're not even taught any of this. Religious war is not something that's ever brought up in an American K-12 school, let alone a university setting. I'm telling you. In my own limited reflective powers here, dating back to K-12 school, I don't recall one time, not once, covering anything having to do with major religious wars and making its connections to what goes on today. With the tugs of war regarding influence, power, property acquisition, again, brainwashing people, getting people to support particular things by default without even thinking, let alone the violence alone. I mean, that by itself should prove it to people. I just don't recall any of that ever being taught, which means no one would ever have a grasp of anything that's actually happening today, which is why you have the name-calling that you have. Well, you're an Islamophobe, or you're a xenophobe, or you're this or you're that. The fun part is that the people doing the name-calling, if they go over to the so-called foreign countries, that they apparently support the people who live there, if they themselves went over there as an American, they'd be slaughtered in the blink of an eye. But again, it's just the influence and the pervasive brainwashing that takes place that is so obvious to so many, but apparently not to others. Again, this list goes on here. It says, of course, it influences publishing Islamic literature through American Trust publications. Yeah. Why do you think you have Qurans being handed out in Texas schools that aren't Muslim schools? Related services such as a halal certification support and community program. It goes on, it says NAIT maintains foundational ties to the MSA and the Islamic Society of North America. Headquarters have been associated with Plainville, Indiana, historically, and later locations in Chicago area, hometown Oak Brook, Illinois. And then it says in the late 1980s, approximately 87 to 88, FBI agents in Indianapolis investigated NAIT and related entities, including ISNA. It says these records were later obtained via Freedom of Information requests and, released around 2008. There's a number of different points. Here's kind of a big one. It says, quote, one memo describes support of jihad, a holy war, in the United States, evidenced by financial and organizational support channeled through NAIT from Middle East countries to Muslims in the United States and Canada. This included planning, organizing, and funding anti-U.S. and anti-Israeli demonstrations, pro-PLO demonstrations, and the distribution of political propaganda against United States policies in the Middle East and in support of the Islamic Revolution as advocated by the government of Iran. Of course, it's endless others as well. It's not just Iran. Other portions stated that within NAIT's organizational structure, there were, quote, numerous groups and individuals identified as being part of a covert network of revolutionaries who have clearly indicated their support for the Islamic Revolution as advocated by the Ayatollah Khomeini and his government, as well as other fanatical Islamic Shiite fundamentalist leaders in the Middle East. This faction of Muslims have declared war on the United States, Israel, and other countries they deem as the enemy of Islam, the underlying common goal being to further the holy war and Islamic jihad, as it were. I then asked Rock again about the school situation specifically. It said, quote, there is no publicly available precise count of American K-12 full-time Islamic schools specifically involved with the North American Islamic Trust. It does admit, however, that the organization has influence with schools, and it does say again that they own approximately 400 plus properties within the United States and Canada. That some of them, again, approximately 300 to 400 are Islamic centers and schools entrusted to it. It says these aggregates do not break out how many are dedicated full-time K-12 Islamic schools versus mosques, multi-purpose Islamic centers, which may house weekend or part-time schools, or other properties. But it says for context, independent estimates put the total number of full-time Islamic schools in the United States at roughly 300, or somewhat higher in some recent counts, up to 400 or 450 range, including various educational initiatives, serving tens of thousands of students. So yeah, they've influenced American schools, they've influenced the material that's taught in American schools, they've influenced individuals that run and fund American schools. It's not just your taxpayer dollars, but it's actual individuals, again, who have infiltrated a lot of these organizations. And one of the, I should say, oldest tactics, I guess, excuse me, that they use to get you to not see what their real intentions are is they just don't tell you what their intentions are. They just keep information from you. And then, of course, they try to lead everybody into a particular direction to look at a particular boogeyman and say, this is the bad guy. But when the people are telling you who the bad guy is, usually they themselves are the bad guy. And it creates massive states of confusion for people because, again, they don't stop to think about who's really pulling the strings. Case in point, I have to read this. This was in our local crap newspaper in the town where I live. And there's a retired history professor who usually writes, and he certainly contributes monetarily, and I think he even sits on the board of this local newspaper because apparently he doesn't have a life and he has nothing better to do. But his name is Alan Winkler, and he used to teach history at Miami University. Unfortunately, I took his class because he taught one of the entry-level history classes basically for everybody. So if you took history, you ended up taking Alan Winkler. And it was mind-numbingly boring. It was just a horrible, horrible class in a massive lecture hall. He had PowerPoint presentations on Auschwitz, left, right, and center. He would sit in the front with these sycophant students in the front row, and he would play acoustic guitar. God knows why. Again, just completely self-absorbed and wasn't teaching us anything about real history because he, of course, didn't know anything about real history, which is exactly why he had the position. See, that's also part of this influence, regardless of the kind of organization is you have to have the brainwashed dummies hold on to particular positions for X amount of time because they know for a fact, having observed their classes, again, these money donors and funders and you name it, is they know that they have a good NPC brainwash tool in just the right position. But here's the most recent article that he wrote in the local, again, town newspaper, which is it's just a rag for the brainwashed. And again, this is going to be the dumbest article that you've ever heard in your entire life. I'm not joking. Keep in mind, again, he's a history professor. He's a left-winger. He thinks the Holocaust happened and 1,000 other things. He basically believes everything that television ever tells anybody about history. And his article was titled Observations, Trump and Anti-Communism. The Red Scare in the Aftermath of World War I was a sorry episode in American society. So he's telling you, right out of the gate, that Trump talking about communism, and specifically not being a communist, is a problem. Again, the last name Winkler is Ashkenazi Jew, so keep that in mind. He writes the following here, quote, "In our divided society, President Donald Trump's anti-communist rhetoric has made a bad situation even worse. In an effort to mobilize support in the upcoming midterm elections, he has chosen to remind us of some of the worst episodes in the past century. Quote, communism is the exact opposite of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. Trump declared in his address at Mount Rushmore for the nation's 250th birthday. And immigrants in that assessment are responsible for the anti-communist plague." Again, he's saying that if you're an anti-communist, then you're a plague. That's also what he's saying. He says, unfortunately, anti-communism has been a reoccurring theme in American life. It is worth remembering the damage it has done to the fabric of our society. Again, Alan Winkler, retired professor, telling everybody that he's a communist Zionist. Got it. He goes on, says, Americans were fearful of radical activism as early as the mid-19th century. Revolutions in Europe in 1848 frightened them, as did the publication of the Communist Manifesto written by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels that same year. Workers of the world unite, it proclaimed, as it called for an inevitable class revolution in a society where the needs of all would be met. Again, he's telling everybody he's a communist. I love this. The Red Scare in the aftermath of World War I was a sorry episode in American society. Really? Again, calling people communists and asking if they were communists was apparently a sorry episode for him. A few years prior, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia horrified Americans and led them to condemn radicalism wherever they saw it. Again, he's talking about this like it's a bad thing. That being afraid of the Bolshevik Revolution was a bad thing. Yeah, bro, they killed tens of millions of people. Raped, murdered, starved to death. Sparked by a number of anarchist bombings, the American government, led by United States Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, took drastic measures leading to the arrest of thousands without proper legal procedures and the deportation of some of them. The activities of the United States Senator Joseph McCarthy in the 1950s were even worse, were they? He claimed that the American government was infested by communists and demanded actions to deal with this alleged disaster. Well, he was right. Still is. The entire country was racked with fear. Universities demanded loyalty oaths, and people accused, not convicted of radical activities lost their jobs. McCarthy was a practitioner of the big lie and the multiple untruth in journalist Richard Rovere's analysis. If a lie was big enough, it was hard to refute. And if there were enough charges, some of them, but not all, might be countered, leaving the others to cause havoc. Republicans in both the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate supported and encouraged McCarthy and gave his movement the power that plagued American society for a number of years. Again, Alan Winkler's crazy. Today, President Trump seems to be taking a page from those miserable episodes in our past. In his recent speech reported in the New York Times, he declared that communism has reared its ugly head right back here in America, quote unquote. He added that it's like a cancer. You got to cut it out. You got to cut it out fast, unquote. Well, he's right, because it's still here. Furthermore, he added that the Stars and Stripes cast the hammer and sickle into oblivion before, and we will do it again if necessary, unquote. There are radical activists in the United States today. Indeed, the Democratic Party is engaged in a debate about whether radicals or more traditional politicians should dominate the party. The charges of communist involvement, playing upon a national fear of Russian President Vladimir Putin, are both misplaced and dead wrong. But President Trump perceives this as a political advantage. We can only hope that most Americans will ignore these comments and make decisions that will better help our nation, unquote. Alan M. Winkler, University Distinguished Professor of History Emeritus at Miami University, where he taught for 3 decades, serves on the board of directors for the Oxford Free Press. Again, Alan Winkler is retarded. Everything in the article is wrong. His take is 100% wrong. It's historically inaccurate. But that's exactly why he's the useful idiot. Even the term useful idiot has commonly been used by communists. And it's used, of course, because those very individuals who are labeled the useful idiot are helping the communist cause, even to their own detriment, without their knowledge. So they're useful, and they're stupid, because they don't know that the thing that they're advocating for is actually leading to their own slavery and their own demise. Alan Winkler is one of those people. But those people are everywhere. And as everyone knows, he's not alone. There are endless college professors who are just like that. There are endless K-12 school teachers who are just like that. So, yeah. He's not alone in his false telling of history. And he's not alone in his useful idiocy either. But that's why it pulls right back again to any organization, whether they be Jewish, Muslim, or any of the others, certainly the fake Christian ones as well, who are like, hey, let's all coexist, let's all get along. Well, the fact is we haven't gotten along since the beginning of time. These different groups that exist, so to speak, and these different religions and whatever you want to call them, ideologies, you name it, and certainly the geographic locations where these people tend to exist, for centuries, for all of time, they have wanted more land. They've wanted more dead people. They've wanted more people to convert to their way of thinking. And of course, they invade property. They just take what doesn't belong to them. And this happens again through endless means, but today more so than I think any time in the past, it happens through political persuasion. In fact, let me mention this too, just very quickly. I put the headline, I believe, on social media the other day, but this is from The Last Refuge. And this right here again is exactly how you infiltrate a country and you upend its judicial system to then do whatever it has to do to not serve the interests of the natural-born citizens that exist within that country, but to actually work for the benefit of the illegal aliens, who again are typically not Christians. It was titled, "The Scale of Ineligible People Called for Jury Duty Starts to Highlight Number of Illegal Aliens Currently on Voter Rolls." Case in point, the people who are being called for jury duty, by and large, are illegal aliens. It says the following here. It says, in most states, the jury duty summons process comes from registered voter rolls. As a consequence, when a person is called for jury duty and is then disqualified as a non-citizen, we have another way to judge the scale of non-citizens on the voter rolls. Reviewing lists of disqualified non-citizen jurors is now taking place in many counties led by citizen inquiry. See, here's the problem. It shouldn't be done by citizen inquiry. It should just be the law. It shouldn't be concerned citizens going, hey, wait a minute, why are all of these illegal aliens getting invited for jury duty? And doesn't that mean then that they're on the voter rolls? And why are they on the voter rolls? Again, it should just be the law. They just shouldn't be on there to begin with. It says this disqualification records, non-juror quote-unquote lists are public records in many states and counties. These reviews are turning up tens of thousands of non-citizens who are on juror lists, which means they are also on voter rolls. Now again, just very quickly, let me ask you a hypothetical question, and I don't think it's hypothetical by any stretch. Do you think that illegal aliens have served on juries in the United States? I think they have, and I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that. It goes on here, this is from the New Jersey Globe, it says about 75,000 non-citizens are summoned for jury duty in New Jersey each year. Based on data from 3 state government agencies, including the Motor Vehicle Commission, a stunning figure that widens the scope of a growing controversy over government databases that may incorrectly identify non-citizens as eligible voters and jurors. While the number is alarming, there is no indication that non-citizens have served on a jury since the judiciary implemented additional guardrails to prevent it. Well, guardrails can be bent, and they can also be broken, and they can be shifted. I find it impossible that illegal aliens have not served on juries in the United States. It says the 75,000 year number are just those summoned people who disqualified themselves by being truthful about their status. I firmly believe the average non-pretending American will soon to admit that many non-citizens actually remained on juries and passed judgment during trial. Well, of course they did. The numbers alone would indicate that that's the case. The number's too high. And it's not that they slipped through the cracks either. They were selected. And they were probably selected based on the particular case that they were being asked to actually participate in. Again, if individuals who are citizens are on trial for something and non-citizens are making judgments about citizens, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a country. It's the exact opposite of everything that's supposed to be happening. But unfortunately, Alan Winkler doesn't know this. There are communists in our country and within our entire government who want that to be the case. Along with all of the organizations that I previously mentioned, the different religious ideologies that exist, all of it. It gives off the illusion that they're working separately against American citizens in America, but they're not. They're working in league with one another. They share resources, they share tactics, they share money, and they just do whatever they have to do to pin one another against individuals who are not them. And that happens consistently, and it's an old tactic, and it isn't going to go away. Case in point, scientism is another one of these fake religions, and as we all know, Anthony Fauci is one of the heads of the scientism ideology. Believe what I say or else. Again, on the eve of him testifying via subpoena or under subpoena powers to Rand Paul's committee, this is going to be highly interesting. I'm going to watch the whole hearing if I can. I'm sure on Friday's episode I'll have plenty of audio to play, and I'm sure, again, it'll be all over YouTube. Specifically, again, I've always highlighted Forbes Breaking News as being the channel that carries a lot of these audio clips. That's one of the places I go for some of these audio clips. But here's Robert Kennedy Jr. on Laura Ingram's show the other day talking about some of the information that was within Anthony Fauci's diary note-taking, again, pertaining to all of the meetings where he was participating and the phone calls he was having and everything else, all of the so-called influence that he was having with a number of individuals who, again, were clearly brainwashed and didn't know what the hell was going on. And I'll play some more, again, contradictory audio clips here of Anthony Fauci as well here after this one. But then I just want to get into, again, sort of the circular conversations that are consistently had regarding contagion. I've brought it up on endless episodes, of course, of this show. But real contagion could not be more simple. And of course, the entire definition of what gain of function really means because there's still individuals out there, unfortunately, who think that the flu is a real thing. It's not. It's just a symptom of being poisoned. So here's RFK Jr., first of all, on Laura Ingram's show, and he even describes how Anthony Fauci very famously took at least one COVID shot during a press conference, of which I've put that particular press conference in that video clip, which is, again, available on YouTube still. But I put it up on my social media pages. And again, he gives a little speech, and then he, takes the injection and then gives another little speech. And wouldn't you know it, apparently, he suffered some heart damage as a result of the shot, while telling people, of course, publicly that it doesn't hurt anybody. So here's RFK on Laura Ingram's show in 3, 2, 1.
Is this massive dichotomy between what he was saying privately and what he was simultaneously saying publicly. He says in his diaries on January 30th that the Wuhan lab could not possibly be the source of the virus.
Oh, we know that was all false.
And then, well, we all know it, but now his diary, he says he knew that, and yet for 2 years he told us that was.
But he was given a pardon prospectively from the last administration. We don't know if it was an auto pen pardon. It doesn't really matter for legality purposes. But Americans want to know, a lot of them, is there going to be any accountability for trillions of dollars lost, children's education destroyed, and public health industry reputation shattered?
Yeah, and millions of people injured. He lied about masks, he lied about social distancing, he lied about the transmission, he lied about natural immunity, he lied about the capacity, as you just said, of the vaccine to prevent infection. He got vaccinated at a very, very public press conference in January of 2020. And then 5 months later, he had, and this is the first time that we knew this from the diary, he had a pulmonary infarction, which is one of the adverse events that NIH, CDC, and FDA said are expected from the vaccine. He never told anybody. He got treated for it privately by the best doctors in America. At the same time, he was telling everybody that that was not an adverse event.
Is there anything else we're missing from these diaries that has not been released that you can share with us tonight?
I don't think, I have to say a lot of this stuff is in my book, but based upon other documents. But there's something very dramatic, even for me, of seeing him write it in his own journal, confessing to being wrong, to lying about all this stuff.
Also loving his own press.
That's an interesting revelation. Again, I remember back during the shot-taking nonsense, we were consistently saying, certainly online and on this show and endless other places, whether or not these politicians and these medical experts are actually taking the shots themselves. Are they fake injections? Are they those toy syringes that look like they actually plunge into their bones when in fact they don't? Is it saline solution or what is it? Well, if he actually suffered a heart condition as a result of taking it, again, the irony is palpable. But here's a 5-minute clip of Anthony Fauci contradicting himself on a constant basis, and before I play it, I just want to make mention of this. Anthony Fauci right now is the pincushion, and rightfully so. Again, he ran point on this because he loved the attention. He loved it. He loved getting private phone calls from people. He loved getting questions, being on the late-night television shows, being on all the news stations on a day-in and day-out basis. He absolutely loved it, but that's because psychos like him love the attention. They love the questions. The problem is that when they lie and when they mislead, they forget all of the lies and all of the deception and all of the stories that they've told throughout time, which means the more they're questioned, the more likely they are to not remember their own lies. As the saying goes, when you tell the truth, you don't need a good memory. Unfortunately for Anthony Fauci, he doesn't tell the truth, which is why catching him in his lies is remarkably easy. So here's him again for 5 minutes straight on a variety of issues, on all of these interviews and all these appearances in 3, 2, 1.
But they're really criticizing science because I represent science.
If you're vaccinated, you really don't need to worry about getting it in a way that's serious or transmitting it.
That is true. That is correct, Chris. It'll either protect you completely against infection, and the chances are very likely that you'll not be able to transmit it to other people. The risk is extremely low of transmitting it to anybody else. Full stop. Vaccinated people are clearly capable of transmitting the infection. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better. If people are not wearing masks, then maybe we should be mandating it. I often myself wear 2 masks.
And I'm quoting you now, at the population level, masks work at the margins, maybe 10%. To hear that they only work at the margins, maybe 10%, would make a lot of people ask, okay, then why was I wearing a mask?
You're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science when you say that this is going to go away tomorrow like magic, when you know that there's no chance it's going to just disappear. We hope this just goes away, burns itself out.
So my question is, why weren't you straight with the American people about this to begin with?
So the bottom line is, it's a guesstimate. I gave a range.
It seemed in that quote to suggest that you were basing your recommendation on polling and what people could accept. Is that not what you meant?
No, I mean, it's a bit of that.
We're seeing all of these school closures around the country. Is that the right move for children and families?
And I think what's going on right now is generally an appropriate approach. You want to start doing something to socially distance yourself. How dramatic that is, closing schools and doing other things, should be proportionate.
It went too far, that particularly for kids who couldn't go to school except remotely, that it's forever damaged them.
Well, I don't think it's forever irreparably damaged anyone.
The U.S. Surgeon General has called it an urgent public health crisis, a devastating decline in the mental health of kids across the country. According to the CDC, the rates of suicide, self-harm, anxiety, and depression are up among adolescents.
And the record will show, Neil, that we didn't recommend shutting everything down. First of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And that was a very difficult decision because I knew it would have serious economic consequences, which it did. Yeah. Because if you look at the people that are politicizing me, there's somebody that all the way over on one level. But there are a lot of other people who look upon me the way they should, as a non-political person that I am. They're not doing it because they say they don't want to do it. They're Republicans. They don't like to be told what to do. And we got to break that. But now is the time to do what you're told.
Where did this virus come from, do you think, today? Did it come from a lab? Was it man-made?
When you have the animal-human interface and you have animals that come out of the wild that are sold at these open, what they call them, wet markets.
Place of origin was not within the market itself.
No, I don't think you could say that.
There's a report today that another intelligence arm of the U.S. government, this is inside our energy department, has joined the FBI in concluding that COVID began with a lab leak in China.
That the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute.
We now know that a bat coronavirus was enhanced in a lab. The National Institutes of Health acknowledged that it funded research of a virus that was studied at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The experiment unexpectedly, we're told, made a bat coronavirus more contagious than the original naturally occurring one.
Take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about.
They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not. What we're talking about now is the gain-of-function research in studies that increase predominantly the transmissibility as well as pathogenesis and alteration of host range of the virus. Nobody is lying here, Senator. It is you. I have to laugh at that. I should be prosecuted.
Here's one more mashup video of him basically talking about the nonsense story of the wet market, that it came from bat soup and all this other nonsense. Again, the number of people who believed that right out of the gate was astounding. Because again, that's not viral transmission. That's poisoning. You eat a dead animal that isn't cooked, you're going to get sick. That's not a virus, though. It's a virus for your body in that it doesn't belong in your body. But it's not something that you transmit. Just like, for example, you don't transmit food poisoning. If you eat something bad and you get sick, do the people around you get sick who did not eat that same bad thing? Does that happen? Of course not. If you get food poisoning and you cough on somebody after having food poisoning or while you have food poisoning, does that person get sick? No. If you sneeze on them, if they have food poisoning, do they get sick? No. Again, that's the aspect of contagion that so many people just refuse to understand because, again, it'll completely upend the entire medical system. For example, just quickly here before I play this last little piece of audio, on Great Awakening the other day, someone was making a comment about how the symptoms of COVID were just like the flu. And they responded to me back that way, and they said, yeah, you're right, the symptoms were just like the flu. It wasn't really that big of a deal. People didn't need to panic. I just responded back, and I said, the flu doesn't exist. There's no such thing as the flu either. It's a made-up name for symptoms of being poisoned. That's all. That's it. There are varying degrees of being poisoned. There are varying symptoms as a result of being poisoned. But it's just a made-up name. You even had Senator Ron Johnson, who, again, has done a lot of great work regarding all of this and exposing a lot of this. But, again, even he is speaking in circles and not getting down to brass tacks. He was on Fox and Friends the other morning, and he openly said again that we were lied to about it being a vaccine because it's not a vaccine, he said, COVID he's referring to. But he said it's a experimental gene therapy. Now let's look at that phrase alone. Experimental gene therapy. That it's not a vaccine, it's an experimental gene therapy. First of all vaccination, all of them, regardless of which one it is, they're all experimental gene therapies. The word therapy, however, does not mean help you. It means change your DNA, change your genes. Experimentally changing your genes by injecting yourself with an unknown or known substances that openly change your DNA. That's every so-called vaccination. That's what they all are. That's why, again, there's in all of this debate, quote unquote, you're always going to have half-truths. No one's going to get down to the real singular truth of contagion and what all of these are. All of these are made-up poisons in vials and petri dishes that are sucked up into syringes and then injected into people, or they are injected into the mass production of other vaccinations. That way, when you take another vaccination of another kind, you end up with similar symptoms to quote-unquote COVID. Then a person takes a false COVID test. It tells them they have COVID. They ask their friend down the street, have you ever had COVID? And they say, well, yeah, here were my symptoms. And then they go, yeah, those are my symptoms too. And then before you know it, they just believe one another. But what's the thing that they both did? What's the thing that they put into their body when they were not sick and then they got sick? Which, of course, leads to the definition, the real definition of gain of function, which, again, I've brought up on the show before, and you know exactly what it is at this point. The definition is in the name itself. It's in the phrase itself. Gain of function means you're gaining the function of a poison within the human being so that it is transmitted then from person to person once the poison is inside of one human being. And if that person gets around other people, then those other people can, not always, but they can become ill as a result of just being around the person who has been infected with the poison. Not coughed or sneezed on, because that's not how contagion works. Although they would love to have that be the case, but that's not how it works. It's done through electromagnetism. It's done through your cells in your body being around other people and their disrupted cells. And then that can make your cells in your body disrupted. And then, of course, you have symptoms of being ill as a result. But gain of function is always the goal. And the COVID shot was most certainly gain of function. Again, there are people, and I don't know how many, but certainly a great deal, of individuals who never took those shots, but have been around people who did take those shots. And the people who are around the people who took them, who didn't take them themselves, they've ended up with cancer. That's gain of function. That's real serious gain of function. And that's gain of function via electromagnetism, because we are electric beings. We're roughly 90% water. We are conductors of electricity. And I've said it on the show numerous times also, even very recently, that the flu shot insert itself openly says and brings up the word shedding, and that you can shed on one another and on other people if you've taken a flu shot, thereby making those other people around you sick. It's an open admission that electromagnetism causes contagion, that is one of the main vectors of contagion. In particular, when a person injects themselves with a foreign agent that disrupts their cells inside of their body. That's why the whole wet market story was false out of the get-go and laughable, because that's not how food poisoning works. It's just not. Not to mention, two individuals can have the same meal. One person get poisoned from the meal and another person not get poisoned from the meal. That can happen too. It's unlikely. In many cases, again, if two individuals are drinking from the same well, or two individuals are eating the same soup, and it's the soup that makes one person sick, the other person is likely to get sick too. The odds are very high that that's, of course, going to be the case. But this business of, well, people were eating at a Chinese Wuhan wet market, and they were chewing on dogs and bats and God knows what else, and then they just boarded a plane and made other people sick. Give me a break. Again, it was just poison in liquefied form that was injected into people under the guise of it being a flu shot. It went out in flu shots in 2020 and even 2019. And then they mass-produced it in COVID shots. That's it. So here's Anthony Fauci again doing his roundabout on the whole wet market story on all the news channels in a 2-minute clip here, about 2.5 minutes, in 3, 2, 1.
It likely jumped species from an animal reservoir into humans and now is spreading among humans. The mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal to a human. Are you calling for the closure of the wet markets? I think they should shut down those things right away. I mean, it boggles my mind, because what we're going through right now is a direct result of that. And you have animals that come out of the wild that are sold at these open, what they call them, wet markets, where people buy these things for festive dinners or what have you. So there's every reason to believe that jumping of species from an animal reservoir occurred.
I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped.
So Dr. Redfield was mentioning that he was giving an opinion as to a possibility. But again, there are other alternatives, others that most people hold by. That the most likely origin is a natural origin from an animal reservoir to human. What they did is they cleaned out the markets as soon as it turned out that it was clear that there were clusters coming from the market, which, in typical fashion, I think trying to make sure that things don't get pointed to them, they probably got rid of the animals that were the intermediary hosts there.
The place of origin was not within the market itself.
No, I don't think you could say that. I don't think you can say that. I think you can say we don't know how and where it originated. There are wet markets in Wuhan that are ample opportunity for a virus to jump, but more likely that it's a natural occurrence from an animal reservoir to a human.
So it came from a wet market in the same place where there's this huge lab that does all the kind of development of exactly what this thing is. That's some coincidence.
It's a coincidence, but there are so many labs all over China that have both labs and wet markets. If it were in Beijing or Shanghai, you'd be saying the same thing. You have a coincidence. There are no lab leaks that have led to pandemics. So there have been accidents in a lab that happens intermittently. We've had experiences with that in modern times recently. But there have never been a situation where a virus escaped from a lab that's a brand new virus that no one has ever seen before that led to a pandemic. That has not happened.
And yet that's exactly what happened, minus the word escaping. Nothing escaped. It didn't grow legs, run out the door, and go, ha-ha, I'm out here now. Now I'm going to make everybody sick. It doesn't work that way. It was intentional. It was intentionally created. It was intentionally manipulated. It was intentionally given additives. All of the components that engage in what they call, again, gain of function. And then it was mass produced. But nothing was accidental, because you can't accidentally do that. It was very intentional. Again, it was a depopulation agenda. That was the point. So, again, if the truth about contagion were really taught, people would understand how simple it actually is. Every student in an American K-12 school would have straight A's in all of their biology, science classes, you name it. Every student would enter medical school. Every single one of us would enter medical school, and we'd all get A's. It's that simple. It's the complexity of the lie that is difficult to memorize, which is why in this day and age, you even have medical doctors using artificial intelligence to, again, look up particular symptoms of a particular illness and then make a diagnosis. They themselves aren't even recognizing what real contagion is because they don't even know what it is. They, of course, aren't taught it in school. They're not taught it in medical school. They're taught to look past any of the symptoms and illness and death that comes about as a result of vaccination. So why on earth would they even, again, think about it? But again, there's an entire class of former doctors, just like there's an entire class of former educators who can tell you about the entire business because they've been in it and they know exactly what goes on behind the scenes. And then, of course, the conclusions that they reached after connecting dots that apparently, again, in those lines of work, you're not allowed to connect if you start to figure out what the truth is. So again, Anthony Fauci's testimony is going to be on Wednesday, July 29th at 8:30 in the morning before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. It will be on, of course, C-SPAN, and you can, of course, watch it on YouTube. It'll be streamed a million places. So I'll bring you some audio clips of that on Friday's episode. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always, and I'll catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.